At the Abraham Lincoln Bookshop, if it's on our shelves, it's history.
This is just off the cuff here, but do you think that Washington would have become a Lincoln-like Whig?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I think he was very much like John Marshall.
Now,
that's the route I believe he would have followed.
in his draft of his inaugural address, he wrote, "I rejoice in the belief," you quote this, "that mankind will reverse the absurd position that
Yes.
the many were made for the few, and they will not continue slaves in one part of the globe when they can become free men in another."
Yes.
Now, Lincoln, of course, said that, you don't enslave because you don't want to become a slave. That could happen as well.
Right.
As a slave owner, did Washington ever see the irony in this?
He did to an extent. I love the quote that you made there, because Washington deeply believed that. Washington believed, and I realize the tension we're getting into with slavery, and so I'm setting it up even more fully. Washington, he said that then, and he said it he said it in so many letters. But what makes America special and different? We are a model for the world. The rest of the country, the rest of the world, there are monarchies, whether they be China or England or where. Well, England, it wouldn't be mostly aristocratic rule, that a few leaders, he realized the monarch didn't have total power. But there were a few and the many were made for the few. And he truly believed, even though he was a very wealthy man and had a large plantation, he truly believed that America was a model for the world. And that's one reason he so wanted the Constitution to work, because he deeply feared during the 1780s that America would collapse and it would be retaken over by England and France and Spain and other countries, that they would voluntarily go back, that the states would break into little bitter things. And he deeply believed in this vision. Now, he also had a strong view of providence. He thought he thought America was specially blessed by Providence. He would call it sort of a great spirit or providence, to be a model for the rest of the world. And he believed that the West was key, and he was afraid that England and Spain were going to take the West without a union because
Did he
there were
see
no
a
troops.
continental America coming?
Well, they had I don't know if he saw beyond the Mississippi, but there was endless land out there. Endless land out there.
France and Spain between, I understand.
But that land was being encroached upon. England had not taken its troops out of the Northwest Territories. Spain was encroaching, and he thought, if we don't have a strong national government with the military, we're never going to hold the West. And our future lies in the West, because he wanted these, much like Jefferson. See, he was a mixture. Much unlike Hamilton, who wanted to keep everybody on the East Coast working in factories and build up industry, Jefferson and Washington saw the future for free men moving west, constant opportunity. And he would say, even the less able among us can go out and prosper in the West. This gives us our freedom. Now, you layer on top of this the fact, how can he be saying these things and writing these things and believing these things, though it's not quite, it's even tougher with Jefferson. But you get it with Jefferson as well, laying on top of the fact that he continued to own slaves. Well, we know he was challenged on it. Now, Jefferson never flips. Jefferson keeps his slaves. He then, after he dies, they remain slaves. With Washington, he is badgered by Hamilton, who's an abolitionist, by Franklin, who becomes an abolitionist, by Henry Laurens, an assistant he just loved from South Carolina. Washington had many relationships, father-son type relationships. And Hamilton was one of them, but Laurens was even more. Lafayette was the best. And Lafayette would constantly, they wrote back and forth all the time, "My dearest father," these passionate letters. Their friendship was so close. And Hamilton was, and Lafayette, as like Hamilton, was constantly saying, end slavery. John Jay, he trusted John Jay. John Jay was constantly saying, you are a model, you've got to free your slaves. So what Washington does do, though, he's trying to rebuild his plantation. He doesn't free his slaves, even though he agonizes about it, even though he says several times, I will buy no more slaves. And I think this is a bad business, and the economics doesn't work. We should end this. But he kept buying slaves. But what he does do that sets him off from Jefferson and he's a person who acts in symbols. He because he's not a great speaker, he acts and he tries to model by what he does. He does free his slave in his will, and on his deathbed he decides between two wills and he rips up one, and we don't know exactly what was in it. The will said that all my slaves, now most of his slaves were actually owned by his wife because she came from it was a second marriage, but all my slaves, and there were well over 100 of them, 125, would be free 1 year after my death. So he does free his slaves on his death, which makes him different than a Jefferson.
We're long out of time, and you're going to have to go soon, I understand. So, two quick questions, one from out there, but just to follow up here. Did he envision slavery? Did he at all see slavery as breaking up the Union, possibly breaking up the Union and being a central problem to our Union?
Well, we don't see him writing about that, but he was very close with Gouverneur Morris. And Gouverneur Morris at the Constitutional Convention, and in many other settings, because he becomes a senator, Gouverneur Morris repeatedly says at the Constitutional Convention that this is what's going to destroy the country, that we can't go on. We have to move toward the abolition of slavery. This will cause the end. And again, he says that at the Constitutional Convention very prominently. And it's not just Gouverneur Morris, but I pick on him because Gouverneur Morris and Washington were very close. During the convention, every break of the convention, the two of them went fishing together. They were very close friends, and Gouverneur Morris deeply believed it. And with Gouverneur Morris saying it as often, and Franklin said it as well, that this is a real problem for the lacking of our Union, that Washington must have realized it.
Here we have an interesting question from AP U.S. History class at St. Louis University High.
Oh, great.
And they ask, did Washington ever express any concerns over the powers delegated to the president?
No, he actually voted consistently at the convention to strengthen the power of the presidency. It came up often at the convention, and he was always throwing his vote on a stronger presidency. And as president, he didn't express any concerns. In fact, actually, as president, he exercised his power. He led the troops at the Whiskey Rebellion, much to the concern of Jefferson and Madison. He, of course, sided with Madison on the National Bank, which, of course, creates the equivalent of a Federal Reserve, a national banking system, and that increases the power of the central government. So, no, he didn't really express concerns about the power of the presidency per se, because his fear was the breakdown. But as he said this in some letters, and he said this in his draft inaugural that you quote. He said, "We are, unlike any place else in the world, a government of the people." He used the same, Lincoln picks up on this later famously, of the people, because power originates with the people and every 4 years returns to the people. And he viewed that as the check on the presidency.
That was an excellent question from
Yes.
University High.
Yes.
I went to Washington University for only 1 year before transferring to history somewhere else. So we appreciate that question very much. I'm going to put you to work to signing some books that you just to sign, please, while I let everyone know about upcoming events that we have. This book by Edward Larson should be a supplement to every other Washington book that we have specially talked about, to Flexner, to Freeman. This should be a supplement because it adds something that they don't go into as much, and go to the beginning of the program and you'll understand why. Also, we have not had the time to go over so many other things that are packed in this book. Facts and opinions that are wonderful on all sorts of things. Really how he was the indispensable man, not in numbers of times during his life. It wasn't just once. I always thought of it as he stepped down from the presidency, but also stepping down from the military and being there to become president and make it a unified event. We haven't really talked about the plantation and how he was a pioneer in American agriculture. We could have talked about that. How he became from Cincinnatus to Fabrius. That's a fascinating little story as well. Read the book and you'll find out. So we appreciate very much Edward Larson being here, and we appreciate as well that, I should look again, I'm sorry, that Norton Morrow, Edward Morrow and Company, the publisher, has brought you to us. And I, of course, as always, thank the staff here at the Abraham Lincoln Bookshop, and also for all of you watching and for the questions that came in as well. Come back again to virtual book signing next time. Thank you again.